You know the classic tale: a dark and stormy night, a lonely castle, a flash of lightning, and a mad scientist's cry, "It's alive." We all picture Dr. Frankenstein and his monstrous creation. But what if the real story was far more unsettling? What if the true inspiration wasn't a fictional character, but a real man born in the very real Castle Frankenstein, whose pursuit of immortality involved experiments far more macabre than anything Mary Shelley ever dreamed up? This man was Johann Konrad Dippel, a multi-talented individual, a theologian, philosopher, physician, and alchemist. He viewed death not as an ultimate end, but as a challenge to be conquered with surgical tools and boiling cauldrons. He didn't assemble body parts to fashion a grotesque creature. His work was more fundamental, more primal. He sought to distill the very essence of life, blood, bones, flesh, and animal horns, into a thick, black, foul-smelling concoction he called his elixir of life. He truly believed this oil could cure any ailment and perhaps even grant victory over death itself. This isn't just a spooky legend. It's the genuine account of the man who stalked the halls of Castle Frankenstein long before any novelist put pen to paper. It's the story of a genius who blurred the lines between genuine scientific inquiry and dark sorcery, a man whose unholy quest to become a deity became the chilling inspiration for one of history's most famous monsters. To grasp the man, you must first understand the ominous circumstances of his birth. Johann Konrad Dippel entered the world in 1673 within the foreboding stone walls of Castle Frankenstein near Darmstadt, Germany. This was no fairy tale setting. The castle, a grim sentinel, had silently watched over the Rhine Valley for centuries, a place steeped in tales of Teutonic knights, feudal lords, and hushed legends. The 30 Years' War had concluded only a few decades prior, leaving Germany a landscape scarred by famine, plague, and deep-seated trauma. It was a world where both God and the devil felt terrifyingly real, where superstition and nascent science were locked in a fierce struggle. This was the environment that molded Dippel. His brilliance was undeniable from the outset. He possessed a restless, formidable intellect that devoured knowledge insatiably. He enrolled at the University of Gießen, where he pursued not just one field, but a comprehensive array: theology, philosophy, and alchemy. He was a product of the late Renaissance, an era when it was still believed that a single individual could master the entirety of human knowledge. Yet, accompanying his brilliance was a perilous, almost pathological arrogance. Dippel was naturally contrary, seemingly finding perverse satisfaction in dismantling the cherished beliefs of others. His initial target was the church. During his theological studies, he developed a profound distaste for mainstream Lutheranism. He perceived established churches as corrupt, worldly institutions that had lost their connection to true spirituality. He embraced radical pietism, advocating for a deeply personal, almost mystical form of Christianity, unburdened by the dogma and hierarchy of the clergy. He published scathing pamphlets, accusing church leaders of hypocrisy and heresy. His writing was incisive, clever, and utterly merciless. He famously declared, "I will not be a part of any particular church or heresy, but will be my own church and my own heresy." This was hardly the statement of a humble servant of God. It was the proclamation of a man convinced that his own intellect surpassed centuries of established doctrine. He was swiftly branded a heretic and forced to flee Gießen, initiating a pattern that would define his entire existence. He would arrive in a new city, captivate the locals with his brilliance, attract followers, and then inevitably alienate the authorities with his radical ideas and insufferable arrogance, forcing him to escape under the cover of darkness. He was becoming a perpetual outsider, a man at odds with every institution he encountered. Having declared war on theology, Dippel turned his formidable intellect to other profound mysteries: the fundamental nature of matter and the very secret of life. He fully immersed himself in the world of alchemy. It's crucial to remember that in the 17th and 18th centuries, alchemy was not dismissed as a pseudoscience. It was the cutting edge of chemistry and medicine, practiced by brilliant minds like Isaac Newton. Alchemists believed the universe held a divine secret, that all matter was fundamentally interconnected, and with the right knowledge, base metals could be transformed into gold, diseases could be cured, and human life could be extended indefinitely. Dippel established laboratories in cities across Europe, from Berlin to Amsterdam to Copenhagen. His ultimate objective was the coveted prize of alchemy, the creation of the elixir of life. He sought a universal remedy, a single substance capable of perfecting the human body and bestowing a form of immortality. And to achieve this, he resorted to the most forbidden materials imaginable. This is where historical facts begin to intertwine with the chilling elements of Gothic horror. Dippel's most renowned creation was his oleum diaboli, Dippel's animal oil. This was a real substance, a thick, black, tar-like oil with an impossibly foul odor. For decades, it was considered a legitimate, though controversial, medicine used as an antispasmodic and anticonvulsant. However, it was the recipe that truly repulsed people. Dippel produced his oil through the destructive distillation of animal parts. He would take horns, hooves, leather, blood, and bones, seal them in a retort, and heat them without oxygen until they decomposed into their constituent elements, yielding his black oil. Imagine the scene: a dark, cluttered laboratory, the air heavy with smoke, and the nauseating stench of boiling blood and burning bone. Dippel, his face illuminated by the hellish glow of his furnaces, tending to his alchemical apparatus, a priest of a grim new science, seeking the very essence of life by reducing dead things to their most repulsive components. These are historical facts, but around these facts, legends began to sprout, whispered by the townspeople who lived near his laboratories. They observed strange lights flickering in his windows at all hours. They smelled the unholy odor wafting from his chimneys, and they heard the rumors. Rumors claimed that Dippel wasn't satisfied with animal carcasses. They said he had turned his attention to local graveyards, that he was a lichen flederer, a corpse robber. The legends asserted that Dippel believed the human soul was a physical substance that could be transferred from one body to another. To test this, he needed fresh cadavers. The stories recounted him sneaking into graveyards under the cloak of darkness, unearthing the recently deceased and dragging them back to his laboratory. There, in the depths of the castle or his rented rooms, he would perform his gruesome experiments. He boiled the corpses in giant vats, hoping to distill the soul itself. He reportedly used funnels and hoses, attempting to transfer the soul of one corpse into another. Did he actually commit these acts? There's no definitive proof. Dippel never documented human experimentation in his surviving writings. However, the stories persisted, clinging to him like a shroud. The boundary between the brilliant, if eccentric, chemist and the monstrous ghoul began to blur. The fear he inspired was so profound that it became its own reality. When you have a man of terrifying intelligence, born in a place named Castle Frankenstein, who openly defies God and admits to boiling down dead things to create potions, it's only a small leap of imagination to envision him hunched over a human corpse, a mad glint in his eye, striving to unlock the secret of life itself. Dippel's ambition wasn't confined to medicine. He believed his alchemical work could create gold. On several occasions, he persuaded wealthy patrons, including nobles and even kings, to finance his transmutation experiments. He would conduct elaborate demonstrations, claiming to have transformed lead into gold, often employing sleight of hand and chemical tricks to produce a small amount of the precious metal. These successes would earn him temporary fame and fortune, but they never endured. His arrogance, his heretical religious views, or simply his failure to produce gold in the promised quantities invariably led to his downfall. He was exiled from Berlin. He was imprisoned for 7 years in Denmark for his controversial religious writings and his alchemical schemes. He roamed through Germany, Sweden, and Holland, a brilliant, charismatic, and dangerous nomad. He was a physician who healed the sick with his strange oil, a preacher who gathered disciples with his hypnotic charisma, and a conman who left a trail of enraged patrons and broken promises in his wake. He was, in essence, a man who yearned to be God. He sought to rewrite theology with his own doctrines, to conquer disease and death with his own elixir, and to create wealth from nothing with his own alchemical knowledge. He rejected every form of established authority, religious, political, and scientific, believing only in the power of his own singular genius. This is the true core of the Frankenstein narrative, the brilliant but arrogant creator who, in his pursuit of divine power, unleashes something dark and monstrous upon the world. For Dippel, the monster wasn't a creature of stitched flesh. It was the chaos and ruin that his own boundless ambition left in its wake. Dippel died in 1734, likely from a stroke, although his enemies whispered that he had finally poisoned himself with his own concoctions. He died as he had lived, embroiled in controversy and constantly on the move, but his legend was only just beginning. In the region surrounding Castle Frankenstein, the tales of the peculiar alchemist born there continued to proliferate. He became a local boogeyman, a cautionary tale told to frighten children. The stories of his grave robbing and his gruesome experiments became ingrained in the local folklore. Fast forward 80 years to the summer of 1816. A group of young English writers are vacationing in Switzerland, confined indoors by relentless rain. To pass the time, they challenge each other to write a ghost story. Among them is an 18-year-old girl named Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin, who would soon become Mary Shelley. 2 years prior, Mary had traveled down the Rhine River, a journey that would have taken her directly past the imposing silhouette of Castle Frankenstein. It's almost certain that she, a curious and well-read young woman, would have heard the local legends about the castle's most infamous son, the brilliant, God-defying alchemist Johann Konrad Dippel. The seed was sown. The story of a real German scientist obsessed with creating life from dead matter merged in her young imagination with the latest scientific discoveries of her own era, specifically the experiments of Luigi Galvani, who had demonstrated that electricity could cause the limbs of a dead frog to twitch. The result was Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, published in 1818. Mary Shelley never mentioned Dippel by name, but the parallels are too striking to be mere coincidence. She took the historical figure and transformed him into a literary archetype. She took the real Castle Frankenstein and made it the setting for a Gothic nightmare. The real doctor's ambition to create an elixir of life from boiled corpses became the fictional doctor's ambition to create a living being from stitched-together corpses. The real man's rejection of God in favor of his own genius became the central theme of her novel, a potent warning against the perils of scientific hubris. Mary Shelley created a myth that has eclipsed the man who inspired it. Yet the truth is, Dippel's story is in some ways more disquieting than the fiction. Victor Frankenstein is clearly a villain, a man whose ambition leads to tragedy. Dippel is a more ambiguous figure. He was a healer whose medicine was used for decades. He was a religious visionary whose ideas, while heretical, sprang from a genuine spiritual quest. He was a scientific pioneer whose work in chemistry, however gruesome, was a legitimate part of the scientific inquiry of his time. He was not a simple monster. He was a man, brilliant and flawed, who soared too close to the sun. His desire to comprehend and conquer the fundamental forces of life and death is not an alien one. It is the same desire that fuels our own modern scientific endeavors. The ultimate horror of Dippel's story isn't that he was a monster, but that he was so profoundly human. His sin was not evil, but arrogance. He believed that knowledge was the ultimate good, and that any method was justified in its pursuit. He couldn't perceive the moral line between distilling animal bones and potentially desecrating human grave, because both were simply steps toward the same glorious objective, unlocking the secrets of God. Today we stand in Dippel's laboratory, We have advanced far beyond boiling bones in a pot. We now manipulate the very code of life itself. We practice genetic engineering. We are on the verge of creating artificial intelligence. We pursue radical life extension with a fervor that would have made Dippel proud. We tell ourselves that our motives are pure, to cure disease, to alleviate suffering, to improve the human condition. And they are. But so, in his own mind, were Dippel's. The story of the real Dr. Frankenstein is not a dusty piece of Gothic folklore. It is a living warning. It reminds us that the line between a brilliant scientist and a mad one is often merely a matter of perspective and success. It reminds us that the pursuit of knowledge without wisdom, of power without humility, is a path that leads not to immortality, but to monstrosity. Johann Konrad Dippel never created a shambling creature that turned on him. He never had to confront a physical manifestation of his hubris, but he was haunted nonetheless. He was haunted by his own restless mind, by his inability to find a place in the world, by the authorities who constantly pursued him, and by the whispers of the common people who saw him not as a savior, but as a ghoul. He was his own monster, a man of genius so consumed by his quest for divine power that he sacrificed his own humanity along the way. The black, foul-smelling oil he left behind is his true legacy, a testament to the fact that when you try to boil life down to its essence, you're often left with nothing but poison and decay.